Today I want to talk about status, and not in a conventional sense, because basically if you go anywhere online, especially in the manosphere, especially in the so-called red pill sphere, something that I am no longer associated with and have not been for quite some time, you'll notice that there's a lot of status chasing, and men are encouraged to basically accumulate resources, wealth, and let's be perfectly honest, that seems to be very important overall. If you look at studies, if you look at general societal patterns, it is important for men to accumulate resources and wealth, whether they're good looking or not, long term, if they want to have families, if they want to get married, etc., etc. However, that's not what this video is about. I acknowledge the importance of these things, broadly speaking, but the devil is in the details. And today I want to talk about a very unfortunate case, a case of a YouTuber who passed away a few weeks ago, and his name was Mitten Squad. Now, Rehab Room, if you don't know him, I will link the video in the low bar, already put out a very nice video covering this topic, and I have to agree with him. Mitten Squad was a YouTuber who covered primarily Fallout games, Bethesda games, Skyrim, and he was around for quite some time, 10 years, give or take. And at some point in time, he did a face reveal, and it turns out that he was very unattractive, unfortunately. Just being objective here, he's a very unattractive guy, and he also happened to be an alcoholic. I'm not calling him an alcoholic. Those were his own words. He made multiple posts over the years referring to himself as an alcoholic, and it seems that he passed away due to causes related to alcoholism or overconsumption of drink. And as I said, Rehab Room covered that story with his own particular take, which I agree with largely on his channel. So there is a consensus here that probably his very unfortunate genes with respect to his looks, he was a very unattractive man, on top of what I have observed, his natural inclination to alcoholism. Now, a lot of people don't know this. I don't know why they don't know this, but addictions are heritable. Alcoholism in particular has a heritability of about 50%, and you only need a certain set of circumstances to promote addictive behavior. And let's be perfectly honest, Mitten Squad was very depressed, and he had a susceptibility towards alcoholism, because otherwise how else could he have become an alcoholic, logically? And he ended up drinking himself to death. Now, I hate to use phrases such as there's no status for your face and what have you, but I think in this case, it might have been true. Of course, ultimately, we're left in the realm of speculation here. But it seems that he had lived a troubled life and did not have a good time in high school or at university and had taken to drinking. And he was very successful, and this is the crux of the matter, on YouTube. He had a channel for about 10 years. He covered mostly Bethesda games, as I said. He covered Fallout primarily, but also Skyrim. And he started with Minecraft. But in his case, and in the case of many people, myself included, much of his success, in my humble opinion, can be attributed to the first mover effect. Much of my quote-unquote success on YouTube, relatively speaking, can also be attributed to the first mover effect, meaning you're one of the first people out there, you start talking about something, there aren't many other people talking about it, and so if you persist over a long enough period of time, you will become somebody who is somewhat known, maybe even very well known in his case, and you will gain many subs and, in his case, many views. And so he was sort of a YouTube success. But the thing I want to focus on here is the interesting dynamic between nominal success on YouTube, and you could extrapolate from this to many other things, and the effects on one's personal life. You see, I think what can be observed here, and I think it's very sad, and it's an incredibly sad story. This was a guy who was the very definition, in most respects, of being extremely unlucky. He got lucky with respect to his channel, admittedly, but in terms of his looks, in terms of his personality, with respect to alcoholism, he got really unlucky. As vaunted as it is, as praised as it is, as sought after as it is, amounts to very little if you don't have anyone to share the status with. And by that, I don't even necessarily mean relationships, but I also mean friends, maybe even family, and people more broadly you get along with. Now, of course, I'm speculating. I don't know the status of the guy in the sense of, did he have a relationship? Probably not. Did he have a lot of friends? I don't know. I suspect he didn't have close friendships, and who knows what his relationship to his family was like. I also suspect, speculation, not very good. So Mitten Squad had nominal status in the sense that he had a big YouTube channel and people thought his videos were funny. But usually when people are talking about status and status chasing, what they're talking about is acquiring status to show off to others. And if you don't have others in your life, whether it's a relationship, friends, family, it doesn't really matter, but others that you at least connect to that are concerned about your status, then it's kind of hollow. Now, in theory, for some people that might be okay. Imagine being a gigantic YouTuber, you don't know anybody, you have no friends, but you have a decent amount of money at least, and you don't need to worry about missing out on rent. That's a very real thing. But I think for the vast majority of people out there, that type of life would ring hollow. Most human beings, to varying degrees, are social. And I made an entire video about this notion of introversion and the sort of meme that has become how everybody's an introvert. Well, as I said in that video, it's probably not true. It's probably just the case that you don't have a lot of people you get along with that sync with you on a certain level. So in some sense, status, which is something we're all chasing. After all, we are human apes working within a hierarchy. We do this instinctively, unconsciously, in fact. We're chasing status, but status itself, under very unusual circumstances, such as YouTube, is insufficient. Status actually needs to have a social connection. If there's no social connection, your status is useless. And I think the best way of demonstrating this is a simple thought experiment. Imagine if you're out on a desert island and you have a ton of money, a huge house, a car, but there's literally nobody there except for you. Nothing. What value is your status? Well, for one, you don't live in a quote-unquote society anymore, so you don't really need these things. But on top of the basics of food and shelter, the fact that you have a big house on this desert island, a car, is totally irrelevant. It doesn't matter anymore. Because status is ultimately about signaling that status to other people, aka you're stranded on a desert island, or you have the very unfortunate circumstances of Mitten. Now, I'm not sure 100%, obviously it's speculative, but he was a very unhappy person, very depressed. He was an alcoholic, and unfortunately, he was very unattractive. And so he probably didn't have a staple of social connections that he could partake in, that he could signal his status to. And the other thing about online fame or online status is that it's not readily transferable to IRL, except in a few cases. There are cases like Destiny where he loves being in the spotlight and he'll go to IRL functions and debates and participate, and he puts himself out there. But for the most part, the existence of an internet personality is a shadowy one that is extremely detached and cut off from, and indeed most people don't care about that. The internet has created a very interesting paradox, unfortunately, namely the ability in some cases to acquire a great deal of status, and in his own little niche circle of Bethesda games and to some degree Minecraft, Mitten Squad had acquired quite a lot of status, but there was nobody around to signal his status to. On top of that, you have this other phenomenon online of what I call niche status. Now, different varieties of status have always existed. So, for example, there was the status of being a king, but there was also the status of being a banker, the status of being a renowned and ultra-talented artist such as Michelangelo, etc. So status niches have always existed, but now more than ever, the internet has created an environment where status niches are so extreme that they're not really transferable to anything else anymore. So if you think about the Sistine Chapel, which Michelangelo painted and created, his status as an artist was rendered into a reality that everyone became aware of. In fact, he was commissioned to do so. That's because his status had interlocking components to it that something like being a YouTuber in a very niche area does not. Likewise with being a banker, an engineer, a monarch certainly, a doctor. And so ultra niche types of status are difficult and sometimes even impossible to transfer into reality. Now, there are exceptions. So, for example, Asmongold, lifelong World of Warcraft streamer. Now he does whatever he wants. He's a multi-millionaire, and he just has fun. And he also does not have the depressive personality. This is such an important thing. Asmongold, think about it. Very successful, much more successful than Mitten Squad, to be perfectly honest. Not really the ugliest guy, but also not super attractive, but he does not have a depressive personality. You can tell. He shrugs off things like it's nothing. He got over his mother's death very quickly, and they were quite close. He's just not the type of person that gets bothered by stuff. Likewise, look at Destiny. Whatever you think about Destiny, by his own admission as well as observation, he doesn't really get bothered by stuff. He doesn't fall into depression. So that's another key element. Mitten Squad probably had depressive tendencies, especially if he ended up becoming an alcoholic, in addition to all the other things. And Asmongold is actually quite intelligent as well, and entrepreneurial. So you put these together and you get a highly anomalous situation in the form of Asmongold. But generally speaking, niche status online, especially as a YouTuber, as a streamer, does not transfer to social status in your real life. And again, if there's nobody to signal to, what's the point? And so what we can learn from the legitimate tragedy of Mitten Squad's death, we can learn many things, unfortunately. We know that looks are very important, and that affected him almost certainly. We know that many things in his life were pushing him towards alcoholism, including his genes. But most importantly, for the purpose of this video, we know that status rings hollow if there's nobody to signal that status to, nobody to share that status with. After all, we're all chasing after status within a social context. When there's no social context, something that many forms of online engagement sort of lack, although you could argue it's a different form of social context, then it amounts to naught, and it ceases to be as fulfilling as it is to many people when they do acquire status, IRL or otherwise. And so status needs a context, and status needs people to share the status with. That's the unfortunate reality, which has become very twisted and metamorphosed quite a bit since the emergence of the internet, and specifically YouTube and streaming. In any event, thank you everyone for tuning in. Many special thanks to my patrons on Patreon and my donors on PayPal. You guys are the best. You keep the channel alive and going. And as for everybody else, if you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe, supposedly that helps out the channel. I've heard. Be much appreciated. And if I'm still alive, I'll check you out next time. Until then, may the gods watch over you. Bye-bye for now. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.